The World Economic Forum, also known as the WEF, recently concluded the 20th of January, their 53rd annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland. But not without leaving us a whole list of draconian measures that they plan on implementing. Now, this should not be taken lightly. What they've done and said in the past is being implemented and has been implemented. We need to look into today to what the World Economic Forum actually spoke on and just exactly where our freedoms are going to be attacked, especially when it comes to crypto and the internet. Let's get into that today at DeFi IoT. The World Economic Forum is an organization that started in 1971 when the US dollar went off its gold backing. It was founded by a gentleman named Klaus Schwab with the intent to bring big business together and look at what they could do to model kind of the success that American companies were having for mostly European and other countries. It turned into it is now this global dominance of around 14,000 of these wealthiest or people in the most positions of power in the world coming together every year in Davos, Switzerland, a high point in Switzerland. In other words, them looking down on us. Their motive is that they know better for the world and the climate than we do, and to control us under the guise of safety, whether it's health or whether it's physical or whatever it might be, is to protect us from ourselves. And that's basically what it is. They don't shy away from saying that. Now, I will say this, that the World Economic Forum this year in their Davos meeting, which concluded on the 20th of January, had stated that they basically realized they're fragmenting, that they're coming apart. And so they're going to really ramp up some draconian measures to control media. They're saying it's because the right-wing extremists or the right is controlling the narrative or changing the narrative. In other words, changing information and giving disinformation or misinformation, wherever those words came from, being bad information, if you will. That's what they're saying. Because people like myself and others try to explain what they're really doing, that is deemed as dis or bad information. They are going to introduce measures in Canada, the US, UK, as well as Britain, are already rolling out these measures to limit and control what information you can find on social media and on the internet. We will also get a digital ID, which will then control us and control what we can see and control what we can say. If we say certain things, we will be sanctioned by some degree. Canada already is passing a law. It's already the first stage, going to the second stage, and most likely what's going on in Canada right now, it will pass, stating that if we as content creators in YouTube, or somebody wants to come on YouTube, we go against what they deem as truth, and it conflicts with what their government says is the truth. And they're creating these governing bodies that will govern truth through the internet, including the World Economic Forum will assign somebody who will work with all the governments of the world to deem what is truth and what can be put out on the internet, including Twitter or whatever, and what is not. Now, those are not elected officials, and they're not even responsible officials to us. They can do what they want to do, and we can't do anything about it. That's the World Economic Forum. Let me just read to you a little bit what they say. And then I'll put the link down below, and you can go in and see what their agenda is, and you can read the reviews, the summaries of their meetings this year. Here is right from the World Economic Forum 2023 Davos meeting website. The world today is at a critical inflection point. The twin triggers of COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine rattle the already brittle global system. Keep in mind, before COVID, it wasn't so brittle. The economy was doing very well. Economic growth in the world's largest economies is stalling. Yes, because of what they did. While navigating headwinds from rising food and energy prices, you see, they also have another report out that I'll give another video on that talks about the crises that are coming. COVID's not one of them. The World Health Organization just recently announced the last few days that they expect in 2023 to lift the actual pandemic qualification. They should already, because it doesn't qualify as a pandemic under a pandemic criteria. But they are saying that 2023 most likely they're going to lift that pandemic restriction. The World Health Organization already knew that. They stated that that's not a priority as an emergency anymore. It's going to be food, and energy, and inflation. For the first time since the 1970s, the world is facing a precarious disequilibrium with growth and inflation moving in opposite directions. This occurring alongside heightened geoeconomic fragmentation. In other words, they're coming apart. Financial sector vulnerabilities, cryptocurrency, including stretched asset prices and high debt levels. Oh, isn't the U.S. right now going to actually extend the debt ceiling again, as they've done so many times for like the last 50, 60 years? The climate crisis spiraling out of control, which could magnify any growth slowdown, particularly in emerging markets, unless these systematic and interconnected risks are addressed. A promise of a decade of action may become a decade of uncertainty and fragility. And then they go on to explain here that, well, I'm going to read it to you. Against this unprecedented backdrop, the World Economic Forum is convening its 53rd annual meeting in January to reaffirm the value and imperative of dialogue and public-private cooperation. Now, as public-private cooperation of the people that they call their stakeholders. They invite them. You have to be invited. You have to be basically on board with the program. So it's not us to get invited. It's those elites. They call themselves the elites. More importantly, to drive tangible system-positive change for long term. For 50 years, World Economic Forum has provided space for leaders to engage in peer-to-peer deliberations in the spirit of improving the state of the world. Never has this mission been more important than it is today. I add than it is today. Because they will go on at the forum and they'll speak about today. Now, here's what the scary part is. They're going to attack crypto. And they're going through the FATF, which is another global, non-democratic organization, police force, that basically, here's how it takes place. If countries do not obey, now they are in bed with the United Nations. The United Nations was present. The United Nations did acknowledge in this meeting that they are working hand in hand with the World Economic Forum to bring about the 2030 agenda, which is that we will own nothing and we'll be happy. That is to help control things. The climate crisis, the energy crisis, etc. All these crises were really brought on by the Economic Forum. If you want to get into more detail, those are other videos. What causes the climate crisis? Well, the climate crisis really is caused by inflation. Inflation by a currency that's been created by countries and manipulated, and therefore it's one that is encouraged to spend because it loses value. If you would change the model and change the model to a currency, maybe like Bitcoin or gold or silver, something that will gather value and gain value over time, people would save and spend less, and we'd have less consumption because we'd have less buying because we would be more willing to save and accrue wealth that way. That would solve a whole bunch of these supposed problems that exist. Now, there's questions even how bad off these problems are. I'm not going to say that we should do our part and be responsible. However, they are concerned that we will not and are not accepting these draconian measures. They cite the fact that during COVID, it was a disaster for them. Meaning that, and what they're implying here, is that it was a disaster because they were not able to control the people. The people rose up fighting for freedom. Now what they're doing is they're regathering and saying, okay, this is fragmenting. We got to come together. We got to do some things. We got to do some really draconian, extreme things, and quickly. One is going to be the digital currency. 2 is going to be your carbon, your digital ID. 3 is going to be your carbon credit score, your personal one. And that's going to determine what you can do and cannot do. 4 is going to be that digital ID, and what's going to come first is through the internet. You're going to have digital ID to access the internet. And they're even saying, do we block or do we just hide anything that goes against what we are saying or what is best for the world? And they've brought on the major media, the major news stations in the world where they're present, attempting to collaborate, give them more power, as Canada just did, to basically dominate YouTubers like me and you and other people that are out there, the people that have content or content creators, and then basically push us out or hold us responsible financially for anything that we say that goes against the narrative. And that will come from official government appointed group or organization that will determine what the narrative is. Now, in Ecuador, that existed during the whole COVID thing, and they would come out and say, do not listen to anybody else. Nobody else is official. The only official and true channel you can listen to are these channels that are offered by the government. When I had the opportunity to go to Cuba, and when I was in Cuba, it was the same thing. Channels that were only official for the government. When I was in Russia, it was the same thing. There was a limited amount of channels, and there were these government channels. Everything was, and you could watch a couple soap operas, but all of that was controlled by the government. When I was in China, same way. I've seen this. I know what's coming. Now, what do? Here's what they're going to do. They realize they're losing control of local governance in schools. That the people are standing up on local levels. Local is where it's at, and that's where we need to participate. They are going to put people, they have over 10,000 young people coming up in local governments or in the school systems and school districts that they have actually groomed and put in these areas to bring about this whole woke, this whole agenda, this 2030 agenda of the United Nations and World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum really moves the heads of the United Nations, okay? They're actually the teeth that are actually getting things done because they're planting the people. And then they even admit that. I'll put the link down below. Research yourself, please. They want to attack cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency, and they're using the whole FTX debacle and all of these other collapses to attack cryptocurrency. Yet you have Circle, you have a few others that were present that represent crypto, but centralized crypto, right? And they were attacking crypto as well. They don't want decentralized crypto. They want centralized crypto. And this needs to be governed. Decentralized crypto, the idea is to make it illegal and to put the countries that support it gray list. So what's that mean? Well, what they won't be able to do is they will not be able to get certain benefits from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, etc. And when they need money, they won't get that. They'll be restricted. They'll be pushed out. They'll be canceled out. So these countries that are really needing, they're talking about separation of rich and poor. You don't play our game, then you guys are even going to become poorer. They don't really care about that. This is about control, and that's what they are. Now, these videos, eventually, if they get their way, which I think they're going to roll that out soon, hopefully somebody will rise up and create a system where we can communicate, and we'll have our own communication, and we will not have to worry about dealing with this internet that wants to be controlled by our governments. I have hope that will happen. I have hope that blockchain will create something that will allow us to maintain our freedoms of speech here. But it's not just going to attack our freedom of speech. Once that carbon credit score is also implemented, that's going to determine what you can do and what you cannot do. Where you can go to work, not go to work. If you want to go to church, not go to church. It's going to restrict you in your beliefs and your ideology. Because if you go against what they consider these ESG, right, these ESG scores for businesses and now for persons, for people, individual people, then you are actually going to be sanctioned, fined, and even imprisoned. They'll go as far as that. And I'll give you an idea. Think we're going to have freedom of speech and be able to go out and protest what we just saw in China recently? What we just saw in China recently, where they actually protested for freedoms back and to open China up for the COVID, and it looked like that they actually were heard because the CCP of China, the Chinese Communist Party, opened China back up again. I have information from a person who lived in China. Actually, he's a YouTuber now, who lived in China for 10 years. And he has reached out and has other people reach out to people who were protesting, and not one of them can be found or heard of at this moment. So, is it another Tiananmen Square? Well, not so obvious in the face. It's more subtle, and that's how it takes place. And that's what I've witnessed living abroad these 20 years of my life. DeFi IoT, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. We want to get this information out to everybody. We're not trying to scare anybody. There is hope out there. People will come together. You're already starting to see it now. And believe it or not, that separation of the red and blue states in America, that's part of that hope. That freedom will remain in those red states. If those people want this draconian measures, they'll be in the blue states. I'm sorry, that's how it's going to be. And that'll be divided up in the world. DeFi IoT, I know there's hope out there. I feel good about it. I know where it's at. And I'm sharing that with you. So if you want to hear more of this, then subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.